Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
And welcome to the show. My name is Chris James. I'm your host. With us tonight is Travis Walton, who in 1975 was abducted by aliens. I couldn't find a bio on you, although I searched high and low, so I'll just go with what little I could find. You were born April 23rd, 1957, so I'd like to...
No, that's somebody... they like to appear knowledgeable. No, it's February 2nd, 1953, but...
Yikes.
I don't know. I guess you're not supposed to give that kind of information out publicly.
That's all this time I thought we were like close to the same age.
Well,
I guess if I had just done a little reading, because you were, what, 25 or so when you were abducted, so...
Well, I was 22 at the
22?
time.
Well, you still couldn't have been born in 57.
Yeah.
So anyway, now that we know that you weren't born in April, I won't say happy birthday. I had the honor and the misfortune to have a table set up right next to Mr. Walton while in Edinburgh, Texas. The line of folks waiting to see him and talk with him was across the front of my books. I did get to talk to maybe 1 out of a dozen people. You are really well liked everywhere you go, it seems.
Well, we really got slammed there, but I'm sorry about my line blocking access to your table.
Not a problem. Did you go to school with the guys that you were working with?
Let me think. I don't think any of them were in the school when I was in school.
It was a bit of a time ago.
Steve would have been too young to have been there. He was 16 when I was 22, and the other guys went to school in Phoenix. So none of us were really. And the crew boss, of course, was quite a bit older than me, so he had already graduated when I was in high school.
Were you really that much into motorcycles, like what they showed in the movie?
Yeah, I had a number of bikes, still do.
The work y'all were doing out there in the woods, was that seasonal, or were you able to do it year-round? Because I know it gets pretty cold out there.
Well, it would turn out to be seasonal. We had of course, the winter. When you get 2 feet of snow, you're not going to be able to get out there. Mm-hmm. And mainly, it's just can you get there? It's not whether we're going to endure the weather. And then we have a monsoon season. It's a rainy season that begins around the 4th of July that can make it really hard to get there.
Yeah, I guess folks that have never worked out in the country don't know what it's like to drive on a back muddy road in a rainstorm.
Yeah, you're very tuned to the weather with passability.
Mm-hmm. How were you all able to decide which trees to cut? Were you given the leeway to take down what you wanted, or were they pre-marked?
Well, they're neither pre-marked. In some cases, like when you're cutting pulpwood or other kinds of contracts, the Forest Service will mark the ones they want. But in our case, that would just be too many trees. We were doing what's called timber stand improvement, which, in areas where the thickets are just way too dense, we remove the ones that are growing crooked or looking diseased or damaged in any kind of way. We prefer the stronger, more mature trees, and according to, some pretty intricate specifications to thin them out to a certain amount of minimum spacing. And on the day that we were doing this, we had an additional part to it where we would cut the trees up into smaller pieces so that they could be stacked in the clearings and burned in the wet season, to just remove all flammable material in strips through the woods. That way, when a forest fire would come through, that would be a place where it'd be easier to fight fire, and hopefully, in some cases, even stop the fire from proceeding on its own.
Cutting fire breaks through the woods.
Yeah.
Now, there were 7 men actually stuffed into that truck. It must have been just a little bit snug in there.
Yeah, it's good. Kind of want to keep the window down, after a day sweating in the woods. But we managed to fit in there.
Now, November 5th, 1975, it was just another day. Y'all had no indication, nobody saw anything weird previous to that?
No, nothing leading up to it, nothing to give us any idea anything was coming. As a matter of fact, the weather was a little more pleasant than it is on some days, so it was a good day, and just a chance to get some good work done,
So you packed up your tools at the end of the day, the sun is going down, you're driving back home when you saw this light. Could you describe what it looked like?
Well, at first it was just a little glow through the trees, and this was a part of the contract we hadn't thinned yet, so it was pretty dense. We couldn't see the source of the light, and so it wasn't, real alarming or anything amazing at first. It was just, I wonder what that is, kind of a thing, But, we'd been hearing some shots in the distance and during the day, and it was deer hunting season, so my first thought right off was deer hunters camped up there on the ridge. Then I could tell that the ridge didn't slope that steep, this light was coming from higher than where ground level would be.
It was just a light through the trees until you got a little bit closer?
Yeah, and I could see up ahead on the path we were driving that there was kind of a break in the trees that was allowing some of the light to shine onto the road. So I said, Mike, hurry up and get up there and let's see what it is. Because, it was just kind of a dawning, increasing curiosity on the crew that, what could that be? It just became more and more, once we eliminated, no, it's not the sundown, not the sunset, it's not the moon. The moon's off in the other direction. Can't be campers. See, and the whole idea with the title of the movie, Fire in the Sky, was there had been occasions where there'd be a forest fire and they'd come and get us, to fight fire, because we're, know how to cut trees and got the equipment and we're ready to go, And there was a morning not too long before that where a lightning had hit a tree and it was on fire up high, up pretty far up the tree. And so we stopped and put the fire out. And so, that was one of the things that crossed our minds is could that be another deal with a forest fire? But, we had not had any, rainy type of weather, nothing that would have produced the lightning. And the lightning is something you really got to pay attention to in that area because it's the highest number of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States outside of the Everglades, which, is all water, so that doesn't catch fire. But so it's the number one place for lightning to hit the trees. You can walk down that rim road there, and you're always within sight of a tree that's been hit by lightning. That's how frequent it is.
Y'all got compensation for these for putting out these fires, I take it.
No, it was just a good citizen thing to put out the fire. Now, if they called us and the whole crew went there and worked the a day or more, of course they would pay us then.
So you come around this opening and you actually saw the craft?
Yeah, just as soon as we broke into that clearing where this piece of light that was shining across the road, we could see it. Alan yelled out, "It's a flying saucer!" I mean, it was just right there. It was just so unmistakable that I said, Mike, stop the truck. And as soon as he stopped the truck, I was opening the door, and the braking of the truck kind of even swung the door open even more because of the momentum of the truck. But very often, we had, we'll be driving, and if you catch sight of, a bear or, a wild animal of some kind, when you call the attention of the rest of the crew, say, look over there, there's a mountain or something. They're lucky if they see it. It's going to be gone before you can even turn your head. So that was kind of my thinking about this UFO. That whatever this was, it was going to be gone in a flash. And so I got out and headed towards it. Now, Alan and Steve, they argue with me about this. They're saying it looked to them like I was in some kind of trance. They think I was under mind control. Mm-hmm. But if looking back at them and their faces, they looked like they were pretty entranced themselves. But it sure felt like my idea to me.
Mm-hmm. What did the craft look like?
It was glowing. Most of it was giving off light, but you could see there was metal surface there. And closer I got, the more I could, immediately I was aware that this thing was not taking off like I thought. But it was making this incredible sound, a mixture of tones that's really hard to describe. I think it was like off the range of human hearing on the high end and the low end. There's some frequencies that seemed like something you could feel more than hear with your ear, and the guys in the truck, said they could feel the vibration in the truck, and the high end was one of those real high frequency things that, when you turn your head a different way, it seems like it comes in and out. It was like it was only, on the border of how high you could, of a pitch you could actually hear.
Something that they call ultrasound.
Well, whatever it was, the guys in the truck said it seemed like something was about to happen. Now, I'm thinking that it had to do with this feeling that I was getting, that there was like a static electricity charge in the air, like it was, there was a charged feeling in the air.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like what you get before a thunderstorm, but more so.
Yeah, something. It had a real weird feel to it.
So you ran towards this flying vehicle.
And then immediately, this was really alarming to the guys in the truck. I left my door open, but Kenny, who was sitting next to me, he didn't get out. Nobody else got out, and I don't blame him. That was the most sensible reaction, Mike, he was sitting on the other side of the truck, and it was uphill from him, so he kind of had a little bit of a delayed reaction because he couldn't see it without bending over, and looking up the hill. But they were yelling at me to get back in the truck. They wanted to get the heck out of there, which was probably the more sensible choice of action there.
As you got close to this thing, did the feeling, you said, of electricity in the air, did it intensify as you got closer, or did it just pretty much remain the same, or you couldn't?
Oh, yeah, it seemed to increase, and, the more I got, the weird feeling, the eerie, and the light from it, that was, kind of making the little trees and the grass and the ground had a kind of a weird look to it, kind of an eerie, kind of a glow.
Mm-hmm. Was it pulsating or steady light?
The light was steady. But the sound was cyclic. It was more pulsing in a variety of different ways.
So you weren't getting like a strobing effect where it makes you hallucinate almost?
No, it was just a steady glow. I mean, it was bright, and the whole surface was, but not so bright that you couldn't look into. You didn't need to shield your eyes or anything like that. As a matter of fact, it was so shiny that it's kind of like when you're watching television and there's the windows open, and you can see the light from the window reflected on the screen at the same time you can see the light that the TV's making. You know, so I could see the surrounding trees reflected in the surface.
Wow.
At the same time, I could, see the light from the craft. But I was reached the point where I was looking up at about a 45-degree angle, and the yells from the guys in the truck were reaching a peak of they were getting pretty frenzied about it, and that was really amplifying the fear I was feeling. But suddenly the sound got louder, and it started to move, and I was already, on the verge of running back to the truck because, I was afraid of what I was doing and the urging of the guys in the truck. But as soon as it started to move, I jumped for the nearest cover. Now, the nearest cover was kind of down in front of me. There was a pile of logging debris there, and there's this log sticking up there. So I got down behind that log, sort of for protection, and they were saying, let's go, get the hell out of here. And so I resolved, they didn't need to tell me I was going to go anyway, but I stood up to turn and run back to the truck. But right when I stood up is when this blast of energy hit me.
Was it something like painful, or was it more of a numbing sensation?
It was more of a numbing sensation. It felt like I've been hit when I didn't see it coming. Kind of, like blindsided in football or something like that, where you get hit real hard and you didn't see it coming. It was a stunning sort of a force, but I didn't actually see the blast of the energy. I just lost consciousness. The guys said that it was now in the movie it makes it look like the beam comes on and kind of holds me there and then tosses me back. I think Hollywood was trying to
enhance the suspense.
Extend the amount of screen time, because it was really just instantaneous blast of energy, and it was so violent that it threw me through the air, and they immediately said, started yelling to each other. They said, "It killed him! It killed him! He's dead!" It was that violent, It picked me up and threw me so hard, so far, that John said that my body fell like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body.
Like you got hit by an 18-wheeler.
Yeah, and just limp and like a dead man, So, I'm always trying to remember to discourage people from saying those guys were being cowardly to flee at that point. When they yelled at Mike to get going, let's go, let's just get the hell out of here, and it was the most sensible thing to do. It would not make any sense to risk anyone's life to save a dead man. If I'm already dead, the Mike's responsibility was the safety of the remaining crew, and so he took off. And I don't blame him at all. It was the smartest thing to do. Smart thing to do would have been to take off in the first place without ever getting out of the truck.
I guess people that have never been in a situation similar to that haven't a clue as to what is going on in a person's mind. You're faced with what appears to be a violent situation, and you've got to look out for yourself.
Yeah, a deadly situation, and again, no point in trying to save a dead man.
Mm-hmm.
So they said they took off, nearly wrecked the truck, making their escape, and they spotted some deer hunters and went and tried to catch them, thinking they'd. Even then, they were thinking, well, we need to make sure that Travis doesn't need help.
Mm-hmm.
So they were debating about going back when they saw the deer hunters. They figured, well, we'll get some people with guns, and they'll go with us. I doubt that would have provided all that much security, but that's what they were thinking. They even thought about building a fire, a campfire, and that was just kind of a security blanket sort of a thing. But they said coming back. Well, Kenny said, when they saw the craft leave, he wasn't afraid that it would come back. He was more afraid of what my body was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
All charred. How horrible is that going to be? And so they said when they got back, they found the spot where the truck had been. Now, in the movie, they made it look like they weren't really sure of where the spot was. But when Mike took off, he revved the motor up and let the clutch out, and it spun ruts in the road right there. So there was no mistaking, where the truck had stopped. Mike said he could see my footprints where, I'd gone up the side of the road there towards the craft. But they didn't find my body laying where it had been. So, thinking maybe I crawled off wounded, they said they made a search with the flashlight. They had one flashlight, and so all 6 of these guys are huddled around that one light as close as they could, And it was pretty intense, At one point, Mike broke down. I think probably everybody cried at some point in this experience.
In the movie, they made Mike to be your best friend in the whole world. Was that true?
Well, yeah, I'd hang out with him, even when we weren't working on jobs, and there was, some of the skeptics try to make it like that we were some kind of a close-knit conspiring group, but some of these guys. There was one guy that had only been there 3 days, and I hardly knew Dwayne Smith, and some of the other guys that just hadn't been around that much,
Well, and
actually, it kind of had a little friction with some of them, sort of a negative relationship. So.
You find that just about any time you're doing hard labor, there's going to be things like that.
You just get along to get the job done.
Now, you lost consciousness when the light hit you, and then you wake up, no idea where you're at or what's going on. Could you describe how that went?
Well, I was in a lot of pain, and I didn't come to real quickly. I just, was hurting, and I didn't know where I was, so I wasn't real alarmed about where I was so much as how I felt, I felt mortally wounded. It felt like something was really wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having trouble breathing. It seemed like I couldn't get enough air. I could see a light above me and a ceiling that was fairly close. So I, assumed the surface I was laying on was some kind of a raised, gurney or operating table or something. And because I was assuming this badly hurt as I felt that the crew had taken me to a hospital. The sound of movement around me, that's got to be the doctors. I was having a lot of trouble focusing my eyes. Everything was pretty blurry at first, even some double vision.
Now,
And
you did see these creatures standing around you. What did they look like, or were you even able to focus on them?
Well, when I can finally, focus, what I had first taken to be, like doctors with surgical mask and cap was actually, these very pale, grayish-white, hairless beings with huge eyes looking at me. And their stare gave me an extremely uncomfortable feeling. It was real icky feeling.
Like they were staring into you, not just at you?
Yeah. It gave me a sort of a squirmy feeling in my head. Now, later on, I figured out what might have been going on there. That they were, like Steve and Alan, saying they thought I was under mind control. Maybe at that point I was. It's not impossible. I told them it felt like my idea, and they said, well, they can make you think it's your idea if they got mind control. So that's kind of hard to argue with. But at that point, if they had mind control, it wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking it may have had something to do with injuries that resulted from that energy beam hitting me.
It could also be due to your being in intense pain and a bit of fear that you'd be pumping a lot of adrenaline, which would also interfere with their abilities.
Yeah, and the feeling that I couldn't, like I couldn't get enough air.
Mm. Now, how about the room? Were you able to look around the room any and make out?
Well, I did after they left. I was thinking of fighting my way past them because the only door escape route I could see was behind them. But they suddenly turned and left. And it was then that I saw this room. It was very cramped, a very small space, hot, humid, and like I said, suffocating feeling, very claustrophobic. And the immediate panic I was feeling it clouded my thinking ability, Mm-hmm. Not to say that I was thinking too clearly to ever get out of that truck, but my main thought was just find a door and get out of this thing, and that I could just drop to the ground and I'd be back in the woods. But in actuality, the craft was probably not in the woods anymore at that point. Mm-hmm. But what added to my thinking, it took years to figure some of this stuff out, but one of the medical tests I had undergone when I was returned was an EEG, a brainwave scan. Mm-hmm. And because of the intense media attention that was just making everything go crazy, the doctor that put me in there put me in under assumed name. Hmm. So the doctor, the technician who's doing this brainwave scan, was not biased by knowing what had been reported to have happened to me. So, in spite of the fact that he knew nothing about that, he reported an anomalous pattern, sort of an alternating wave moving from front to back kind of a thing is the way he reported it. Hmm. And I'm thinking that if that energy had, scrambled the neural circuits, that was what was preventing them from subduing me or keeping me anesthetized or whatever they needed to at that point.
Now, unlike in the movie, you did manage to get out of that room?
Yeah, I went looking for a way to, I found some what looked like doorways and tried to open them. There was some controls, levers, buttons, mm-hmm. And nothing would open the doors. Most of them didn't seem to do anything that I could tell. May have not had anything to do with the doors, but I couldn't see any doorknob or button or any way to get those doors open. The only available door was the one I'd entered, that compartment. So when this man came in from the way that I'd come in, I took him to be someone there to rescue me. I took him to be, maybe Air Force or some military effort to rescue me from these creatures.
He didn't look anything like the folks in the medical room.
No, those were a little short. We didn't have the term grays back in those days, but that would be the closest description. But this guy looked very much just like a human being. Now, I've had 42 years to think about this, and it's not out of my realm of reasonable possibilities to think that there could be alien species that look a whole lot like us. There's a lot of species here on the Earth that resemble each other very markedly and aren't related at all. But other people have come up with a theory that maybe these small creatures knew that I was going to remain combative with anything I thought was that fearsome, and so they just wanted to present me with something that I would feel more confident, feel less threatened, less panicked by the look of them. Now, some people say, well, maybe they've whipped up some sort of an android or a robot or something of that nature, or went to a great deal of trouble to find a species nearby that looked similar, or had some way of simulating something that was going to qualm my fears and make me more cooperative. But for whatever it was, it must have worked, because when he wanted me to go with him, I went along. He took me out of there.
No sound. He never.
Well, I was screaming. I was, babbling like a maniac and yelling, but he wasn't responding. But he was wearing a helmet over his head, a clear, transparent helmet, and so I didn't get too alarmed by his non-response. I was thinking maybe he couldn't hear me with that thing on, or talk with it on. But even so, it might have been something more to do with I was so irrational, manic, that he probably thought it'd be useless to try to talk to me.
Did he lead you back to the same room that you'd escaped from?
No, he continued in a different direction through what I take to be kind of an airlock sort of a thing. Because when the door on the other side opened up, it seemed a lot cooler and a lot brighter and easier to breathe. I still felt, mortally wounded, like something was really wrong inside. And this guy was moving me as quick as he could. And when we got outside, it wasn't in the woods. It was inside of this big room. It could have been like an airplane hangar, or maybe part of a larger craft. But I didn't really have much of an opportunity to study my surroundings so much. I was kind of unsteady on my feet, and he was rushing me along. I had to pay attention to keep from falling down. And so he took me out of there to another room. And there were some other human-looking people in a similar uniform, except for the helmet. So I started over with all my screaming and questions and everything.
Now, at what point did they manage to put you back under? Well,
they started leading me over to this table, and I was saying, "What do you want? Why are you doing this?" And now with no helmets, I couldn't see any good reason for them not to answer my questions. So I started to resist.
Mm-hmm.
But there were three of them, and I was in a kind of a weakened condition. I was in pretty good shape. I was a pretty strong person at that time, kind of work I was doing. But they overpowered me and got me down on the table and put a mask over my face, a clear gas mask, actually, that knocked me out pretty quick.
And the next thing you know, you wake up. Were you near Haber, or were you in the vicinity of the place?
Well, I was within sight of town. I think where they chose to deposit me was a place where they would be least likely to be spotted, but still be able to monitor my progress in getting help. It's a good thing they didn't take me back where they took me from, because I would have froze to death.
Mm-hmm. Now, you saw their craft before they left?
Yeah. It was there was a light. It was giving off some kind of light, but I don't know whether it was like an opening, a window or a door or something closing, or if it was a glow that just stopped. But by the time I could turn my head in that direction, the light was off, and it was just shiny metallic surface.
Did it look like the same craft that you'd first encountered?
No, it was a different configuration, and it suddenly shot upward.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't change orientation. It didn't go on edge and point edgeward upward. It just went straight up really fast and sort of sucked the air in around a little bit and moved the branches on the trees. But it was silent.
You were able to get to the gas station where you found the phone booth, which surprisingly the phone booths are still there. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's there kind of as a monument to, the phone company. When I made the phone call for help, it was a collect call. The way those phones were in this part of the country at that time was you could just pick up the receiver and talk to the operator without depositing any coins. And the operator was aware of this massive search for a missing person, and it was probably had something to do with the panic in my voice, screeching in the phone. But anyway, she listened in on the call, and probably illegal, but a good thing actually in the long run, it turns out. But she reported it to the sheriff, who sent an officer over there to check the phone booth.
Oh, so Mike Rogers didn't drive all the way out in the rainstorm looking for y'all?
No, that's Hollywood fiction. I called my other brother-in-law, and no Mike Rogers at all. It was my brother, who normally lives in Phoenix, and during this missing time part, he had come up from Phoenix to participate in the search for me, and had exerted a menacing interview with the men had they actually killed me and hidden my body, as the sheriff's department suspected.
So they took you to the hospital. Did the staff find any indication of bruising or any other injuries?
No, there was no bruising. The doctor found what he called a 2-millimeter red spot on the inside of my arm, but in his report he wrote that it was not over any major blood vessel. So this whole concocted theory from the skeptics that was proof that I'd been injecting hallucinogenic drugs, it's just not possible. It wasn't over a blood vessel. And in addition to that, the doctors submitted samples to the county medical examiner's drug screen, which proved there was no trace of any drug in my body. But the debunkers, the naysayers, were desperate to explain it away any way they could. Beginning with, no way, you murdered him, you hid the body, and you're making up the most unbelievable cover story for a murder.
They could have easily just said a bear came and got you, and nobody would have really questioned it.
Yeah. We're out in the wilderness like that, you want to use the restroom, you walk over the hill out of sight of everybody, and, a wild animal could drag you off, and you could explain a disappearance that way. But the theories, one by one, of the debunkers were every possible alternative that you could possibly think of. So, in the end, it's really winds up being a perverse kind of endorsement when each one of these theories were conclusively disproved. They exhausted every possibility trying to explain it away. But, I don't know, 6 men, facing serious legal consequences for a murder were given lie detector tests by state police. And they passed. And at the time the 6 of them passed, the president of the American Polygraph Association said the odds would be 1,000,000 to 1 of there being a mistake. No single test is 100%, but when you have that many people passing tests on the same issue, it's just virtually airtight. And that was with 6 tests. There's now been 16 past tests.
Jeez.
I've passed 5 tests from 3 different examiners, all of them with years of law enforcement interrogation experience. So. But every sort of medical test, every sort of theory, there was a theory that it was just a story to get Mike out of his logging contract, which he actually went and got signed statements from the contracting officers that not only would such an event have no bearing on whether he was, his standing with the contract. He never even brought it up when the contract ended. It was never even discussed.
Stanton Friedman and J. Allen Hynek interviewed you. How about anybody from the government?
Well, I've heard through unauthorized sources that there was definitely a lot of government examination of this incident and surveillance of everybody. But it was really strange how harassed the crew was and how I was just totally left alone. Somebody told me, that for some reason it was that I was protected, that it was hands off with me, but I don't know why, because here's this debunker who's devoted several books and all these multi-page essays that he sends out to the media attacking, and never attempted to even phone me up. There's the phone. I never got a call. I was just left alone. Although he went out of his way to contact the rest of the guys. Steve changed his name and moved to Texas, and this guy tracked him down, took him out to dinner, and tried to persuade him to take a $10,000 bribe to discredit the incident. To give him what he wanted was to go to the public and say that it never happened.
Kind of wonder what the motivation is.
Yeah, it was peculiar. It was certainly disproportional. It's not just somebody who just happens to think this isn't real. I mean, he didn't have the means to pay the $10,000. So that suggests to me that he was being bankrolled by some other agency to offer this bribe.
At what point did you decide it was time to write a book?
It took a couple of years, but I was just so exasperated with things, that rumors and things that were of course, they dig up the dirt on everybody in the crew, and anything they do, a smear campaign, and all these ridiculous theories, and things that were disproven years ago were still being bandied about. And so I just felt like it was time to set the record straight and write it up.
Now, you had to use a typewriter back then. We didn't have home computers. Was that
that was quite a job.
I can imagine.
My mother-in-law would come over every 2 days. Isn't that done yet? Isn't that done yet? I didn't know anything about writing, so and typing it out by hand on a typewriter, that was a big job.
As you were writing out your story, did it feel as if it was helping to clear your mind, or was it making...
Yeah, there was a sort of a cathartic effect to finally write it out. I was kind of a person that didn't want to speak in front of the class, in high school. So it wasn't easy for me to do interviews and talk in front of a group. So it took me years to get over that. And I think that's sort of a personal development that's probably a good thing, that now I'm able to talk to people.
Well, I've read your book several years ago, and I must say it was well done. I wish I could do something like that using a computer.
Well, I'm looking at doing a second edition to kind of catch up on more of the more recent discoveries and update a lot of the follow-up research that's even more conclusive concerning the efforts to discredit the crew, and also just physical evidence, just things to do with the event itself.
How long did it take you to actually get the thing from when you first started typing until you were like, okay, it's time to send this off to a publisher?
Oh, more than a year. I don't remember now. I could go ask my wife how long it took, but it was quite a long time.
Mm. And who did the illustrations?
Mike Rogers. He was constantly being asked by reporters that, well, draw this thing. What does it look like? And so, he wasn't satisfied with the sketches that, Dwayne Smith and one of the guys on the crew, he drew one that was used in interviews and newspaper articles, but none of them were really doing justice to what we saw. So he was doing his best to try to capture the awesomeness of the whole scene, and it started with that. And that was the only thing he did for a while, and then I asked him to illustrate the rest of it.
Did he continue with his business cutting down the trees in the woods, or was that best left?
Yeah, he continued to have forest. He went back to work for the Forest Service, and the whole idea that he had to, that he was in some kind of bad terms with them, and there was any problems with the contract was just made up stuff. When you're on a smear campaign, don't let the facts stop you. But anyway, he went back to work. But I switched to working at a mill here that makes wood moldings, and then eventually went to work at a paper mill, and put in a lot of years at that.
Now, did Hollywood contact you, or did you contact somebody out there for the movie?
Well, I never contacted anybody. They always came to me, and eventually they came to me, and I resisted the idea of making a movie. I thought this was just, revive something I was hoping would just fade away with time. But the thing that convinced me was, he says, if you create this where people can sort of relive it in their minds, that maybe it'll, open up their willingness to look at the facts. And so that was the thing that convinced me. And it turned out to be the case, that seeing the movie encouraged people to get the real story. Ironically, in spite of the fact that Hollywood got a little carried away with their creative side.
Yeah, they really took some liberties with your story. How much of the movie would you say was accurate?
Well, I've said, 85% or something like that captures the essence. It certainly leaves the viewer with the emotional experience. People leaving the theaters back then, felt like nothing else could have, given them the feeling of what we'd lived through there. So that helped, and it did increase people's willingness to look at the facts. But in spite of that, one day I'll get a remake of the movie and stick closer to the real story. Now, some people blamed me for Hollywood's fictionalizations, but that's definitely not the case. The movie was well underway before I ever got a copy of the script, and the copy I had eliminated those parts aboard the craft where they got the most away from what happened.
Did that kind of Did that kind
back
of get
then,
to you?
Pardon?
Did that kind of get to you when you actually did see the movie and it's like, that's not how it was?
Yeah, that's not how it was. Well, it upset all of us, It's just, I felt sort of betrayed, that, but the guy who talked me into it, the screenwriter, really wasn't to blame for that. It was kind of out of his hands. He wanted to stick closer to the real story, but he'd written about this phenomenon before, and these beings have been seen in numerous places. But Hollywood wants everything to be totally original, totally fresh. So that's why they changed the look of the beings. Brandon Tartikoff saw this other production that depicted the same kind of beings, and he said, "Boy, I'm gonna pull the plug on this project if you don't change the look of them." And so that's extreme. So they compromised just to get the project continued.
I saw there at Edinburgh you had some posters that were, I guess, in Japanese.
Yeah, that was in Chinese.
Chinese?
I gave a talk in Hong Kong, and it was just a souvenir from that.
How did that work out? They said, okay, we want you to go to China, to Hong Kong. They put you on a plane and they flew you out there?
Well, Paramount, the movie studio, did set up a publicity tour, and I did a lot of stuff that they had arranged with their people. But later on, the media came to me for things, and that thing in Hong Kong was at the request of the people who were organizing a group event there in Hong Kong. They brought me over.
When you went back to the scene of the abduction, you'd found some odd growth in the trees. Could you tell the audience about that?
Well, during the Paramount tour, they had us doing an episode of Special Edition or Hard Copy, one of those kind of television shows. And because of the timing of the release of the movie, they were not going to be deterred by the fact that there was 2 feet of snow out there. So even though you could not in any way get out there in a 4-wheel drive truck, they went and rented these big snowcats from the ski run. Big, 4-foot wide tracks that can just go over the top of snowdrifts and stuff. And they got us out there, and there was a little bit of momentary, is this the spot kind of a feeling. But I thought that was because of the deep snow. It just made it look a little different. But I found out later that Mike figured out that it was because the trees nearest where the craft had come down were bigger than they should have been. This was months later that he went and took a core sample and verified it. And I don't know how long it was before he told me, but I found out that he'd taken a core sample, and you could see that this tree that was 85 years old at the time of the incident, here at the time of this, the movie was being made was 15 years after the incident. In the 15 years, the tree had doubled in diameter. And so it went from 85 tree rings and the next 15, which of course, because it's the outside of the tree is an even bigger circle. It's a geometry problem as far as volume of wood fibers.
Mm-hmm.
It was calculated that it was producing wood fiber at 36 times the rate that it had previously. Well, there was some follow-up research later after a lot of the trees had been killed by a forest fire that came through. And we were able to get a complete cross-section of the trees. So the presumption that these thickened rings were around the entire circumference of the tree that weren't borne out. It was more pronounced on the side of the tree in the direction that the craft had been. And it's counterintuitive. You would think that radiation would sicken a tree, make it die, or at least grow slower or something. But Ben Hansen was the host of a TV show called Fact or Fake, and he followed up with some research. Found out that the Scots pine trees in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear accident had a similar surge in growth because of the exposure to the radiation.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's an unusual effect, but apparently radiation makes at least pine trees grow faster.
Getting a little off the subject, I understand Ruben Uriarte taught you some Spanish.
Yeah, my son teaches Spanish at the college, so I know a little bit of Spanish, and so we would joke back and forth in Spanish. But he taught me some of the naughty words.
Yes.
That was really funny. He's a card. I really like him.
He asked me to mention that. Do you have a problem with what we call drive-by tourism? People come to your house at all hours and, oh, there he is, or anything like that? Yeah,
there was a lot of that. A lot of it was not real positive at first. John describes, being seen downtown, have people scream out the window, "Where'd you hide the body?" and that kind of stuff, or name calling and negative things. But it's become more positive over time. But, I have examples of, there was a guy that drove here from Louisiana just to see me, and I was out of town. I was doing an appearance somewhere else. And so he just turned around and went home. And then later, when I was home, he drove all the way back up here again.
Yikes.
Just to meet me. And there's been a number of examples like that. We live 3.5 hours from Phoenix here, and a guy came up here in a taxi to talk to me,
Zoinks.
And there's the taxi waiting for him to get done, and, we had a little meeting there, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes at the most, and he got back in the taxi and went back home.
Was he interviewing you, or he just wanted to talk to you?
He just wanted to talk to me.
I saw a lot of that at the conference in Edinburgh, where people would just want to come up and share a moment.
One guy said he come there from Florida.
Amazon is selling your book for about $69.99. How can folks get a better price?
Those used copies, I can understand. It's a collector's item. Maybe it's an earlier edition that's not made anymore. But there is a pirate edition out there that is just theft, that people have actually gone to the trouble to print a whole new thing trying to rip me off. And it's an early edition that isn't even half as big as the current up-to-date edition. But people actually came up to me at one event and asked me to autograph it for them.
So where would people go to get a genuine copy of your book?
Go to my website, traviswalton.com, and there's a deal there where you just click on the buttons and on PayPal, and I get orders out just almost the next day, just the next post office business day. And
looks like I'm going to have to buy a new copy because I have searched my bookshelves and I cannot find that early edition that I used to have.
well, even the first time that I got the longer edition out, the one that was double what that. The first book I wrote back in '77 was called The Walton Experience, but this Fire in the Sky one that I wrote after the movie was made, that's got a couple of updates. And so the first one, the hardcover, was I was ripped off by the publisher. Just basically stole it. But, this one I self-published, and so the only place to get it is from me.
Mm-hmm. You'll be at the Sedona Cosmic Awareness on April 20th, 2018?
Yes, but the day before that, I'll be at George Norrie's stage show in Scottsdale on Saturday the 19th. Yeah, I think that's the date, isn't it? On Saturday of that weekend.
So anybody wanting to see you up close and personal, that's the soonest they'll be able to catch you.
Yeah, it would be in Scottsdale this next weekend on Saturday.
I take it that's your phone ringing. Any last words you want to tell the audience before I let you get back to your life?
Well, you might want to go on YouTube and check out this video for a band called the Travis Waltons. Aaron Paul, the actor in Breaking Bad, does a cameo for him to promote the song that they are singing there. But I contacted the band and they said, "Yeah, we did name it after you." But they're in the UK.
That's amazing. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show with us tonight, sir, and I hope you have a successful rest of your career.
Well, thank you. I consider it a job. During the times that I just went to work 12 hours a day at the paper mill, well, I didn't do any of this kind of stuff, and that's when I actually made a living.
Do you find, now you are retired now, I take it?
Yeah.
Do you find that you feel as if you need to go back to work so you can relax a little?
Yeah, it's kind of that way, I can survive on my pension. As a matter of fact, I couldn't even do this if I didn't have it because I'm not in it for the money. This is definitely I'm on a mission to make people realize this is real. Things do happen, and here's the evidence for it. People need to know that we're not alone in the universe.
I really appreciate you being on the show with us tonight. This has been Travis Walton talking about his abduction experience from 1975. Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Truck. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?